I thought silence would save my family. It destroyed me instead. Brad Pitt's story didn't break in one moment. It fractured quietly over years of pressure, silence, and a family crisis the world never fully understood. In this documentary-style recap, we trace the real timeline behind his collapse, the hidden wounds from his childhood, the pressures of fame, the plane incident that changed everything, the custody battle that reshaped his life, and the quiet years where Brad rebuilt himself from the ruins. Using verified reports, court filings, rare interviews, and Hollywood's own timeline, this video uncovers what truly broke Brad Pitt, emotionally, publicly, and privately. This is the untold story behind the fall, and the beginning of the man he later became. The warning signs didn't come from a headline, they came from the quiet moments no one paid attention to. Long before the divorce filings and the jet fuel scandal of 2016, people close to Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie described a pattern that never made the tabloids. Brad avoiding conflict at all costs, and Jolie running a household built on intensity, ambition, and constant motion. A producer quoted by Entertainment Weekly later summed it up bluntly: Brad swallowed everything. That was his survival mode. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Brad built the image of the steady leading man, grounded, generous, the calm center of Hollywood chaos. But beneath the surface was a behavior formed in his Midwest childhood: stay quiet, keep the peace, don't upset the room. Friends from Missouri described him as the mediator, the smoother, the kid who stepped between arguments rather than speak up. That coping mechanism followed him into adulthood, and straight into one of the most scrutinized marriages in America. As the Jolie-Pitt family grew from 3 children to 6, their schedules stretched across continents. Brad filming Moneyball and World War Z, Jolie directing Unbroken and By the Sea, both juggling humanitarian work. People magazine later reported that they were rarely on the same continent for long stretches, and insiders noticed the emotional drift, small, almost invisible cracks that the public mistook for the rhythm of a power couple. At events, they remained, Brangelina, flawless and united. But between those appearances were long stretches without them being photographed together, months where Brad disappeared into film sets, and Jolie traveled with the children. In 2015, while promoting By the Sea, Jolie insisted the film wasn't autobiographical, yet its story of a crumbling marriage drew headlines like, "Art Imitating Life?" from The Telegraph. Fan forums treated it as an omen, speculation labeled, a subtle signal that something was deeply off. There were smaller clues, the kind that only make sense in hindsight. Crew members on Fury described Brad as exhausted, often drinking heavily after shooting, speculation, but consistent with later admissions. In 2017, Brad told GQ Style, "I can't remember a day since college that I wasn't drinking." Meaning, even during the years the world thought he was thriving, Brad Pitt was slowly unraveling. None of this triggered tabloid frenzy at the time. No explosive fights, no dramatic separations, just a man quietly drowning in expectations, fatherhood, work, and the belief that endurance equals strength. He tried to hold the household together by absorbing every stress, every conflict, every unspoken fear, until the coping mechanism that shaped his entire life became the very thing that would break him. Brad Pitt didn't collapse in 2016. The collapse started here, in the silence, the pressure, the emotional drift, long before a plane ever left the runway. The moment everything fell apart happened in a locked cabin at 30,000 feet. On September 14, 2016, a private jet carrying Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, and their children became the setting for the most dissected argument in modern Hollywood history. According to FBI summaries later referenced by NBC News and People magazine, the dispute escalated verbally and unfolded within feet of one of the children, a detail that instantly turned a family argument into a federal headline. 5 days later, Jolie filed for divorce with health of the family cited in legal documents. No warning, no joint statement, just a sudden fracture so sharp that even insiders described it as a blindside. And from that moment on, Brad Pitt found himself not in a marriage crisis, but in a full-scale public investigation. FBI officials interviewed Brad, followed by assessments from the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. While the details of the argument were never fully released, both agencies eventually cleared Brad Pitt of any criminal wrongdoing, ending the investigation by November 2016. But in the world of celebrity narrative, being cleared is not the same as being believed. Tabloids ran with the story. Fan forums speculated, often unfairly, that this was the day the kids turned away from Brad, speculation labeled. International headlines framed it as a meltdown, a collapse, a turning point. Jolie's request for full physical custody only amplified the narrative that the plane incident was more than a fight. It was the trigger for the unraveling of Hollywood's most iconic family. Brad Pitt stayed silent, not one interview, not one denial, not one attempt to explain. And that silence, the same coping mechanism that defined his childhood, became the perfect blank canvas for speculation. Court filings from late 2016 revealed that Brad's access to the children was initially restricted to supervised visitation, a detail that multiple outlets confirmed. For a man who built his identity around fatherhood, the emotional impact was immediate. A friend told GQ that Brad looked hollow during this period. Jolie, meanwhile, moved with the children to a rental home in Malibu, marking a physical separation that mirrored the emotional one. Press coverage was relentless. Some outlets blamed the pressures of a global family. Others pointed to Brad's admitted drinking problem, citing his later confession. "I hit the wall." The phrase became the unofficial timestamp for the beginning of Brad Pitt's collapse. But the hardest blow was not the investigation, nor the headlines, it was the quiet consequence that came afterward. He no longer had daily access to his children. That was the real fracture, the wound that would define the next 3 years of his life. The plane incident didn't destroy Brad Pitt. It exposed everything he had spent a lifetime trying to hide, the silence, the wounds, the avoidance, and turned them into a battle he could no longer outrun. The real collapse didn't happen in court or on a jet, it happened in the quiet spaces where Brad Pitt used to be a father. By late 2016, just weeks after the plane investigation ended, Brad found himself facing the consequence he feared more than any headline: restricted access to his own children. Court documents later reviewed by ABC News showed that all visits were initially supervised, monitored closely by professionals. For a man who built his life around being a present father, it was the single most devastating outcome of the divorce. This wasn't speculation, this was the legal reality. Jolie retained primary physical custody, and Brad's role became dependent on schedules approved by therapists and guardians. Sources quoted by People described Brad as determined but devastated, attending therapy sessions and cooperating fully to expand visitation rights. But even with compliance, the emotional distance between Pitt and the children grew. Some kids attended sessions, some didn't. Some responded warmly, others hesitated. Every detail fed the narrative that the family was fracturing in real time. Fans felt the shift too. On forums and Reddit threads, speculation-labeled theories spread quickly. The kids have chosen a side, they're distancing from Brad. Nothing official confirmed this, but the lack of public father-child sightings added fuel to the speculation. The world had once seen Brad carrying kids through airports and onto red carpets, now he walked alone. Through 2017 and 2018, Brad fought quietly in court to win back more regular access. Legal filings that surfaced later revealed a pivotal moment in June 2018, when a judge warned Angelina Jolie that limiting the children's contact with Brad could result in her losing primary custody. Variety, CNN, and E! News all reported on the order, a rare instance where the court openly intervened. It was a brief legal victory for Brad, but it didn't restore what had already been slipping away. At the same time, Brad publicly admitted for the first time that he had a drinking problem. In his 2017 GQ interview, he said he had taken things as far as I could take it, and joined Alcoholics Anonymous. That confession wasn't about saving his image, it was about survival. The quiet man who avoided conflict was finally confronting the wound he had buried for decades. Yet even with sobriety, even with court orders pushing for balance, the damage inside the family didn't heal. Public appearances showed Jolie with the children at red carpets, graduations, and events. Brad was absent. Fans noticed. Tabloids questioned it. Rumors grew stronger whenever a child used the surname Jolie instead of Jolie Pitt, like Zahara's sorority introduction in 2023, an action widely analyzed but still speculation labeled. By 2019, Brad had regained more structured visitation, but the emotional distance remained. People who worked with him on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood described him as focused, quiet, and carrying something heavy. That something was not the divorce, it was the realization that no legal filing, no therapy session, and no public statement could restore the closeness he once had with all 6 children. The father who once carried his family on his shoulders was now learning what it meant to watch from a distance. And that, more than the headlines, more than the jet, more than the court battles, was what truly broke him. The coldest chapter of the Pitt-Jolie breakup didn't happen in a courtroom or on a red carpet. It happened inside the walls of a French vineyard that once symbolized their unity. In October 2021, Angelina Jolie quietly sold her stake in Chateau Miraval to Russian billionaire Yuri Shefler, the owner of the Stoli Group. Within days, headlines turned from routine business news into a legal firestorm. Brad Pitt was suing her. The lawsuit landed like a shockwave. Court documents filed in Los Angeles and later obtained by Variety and the New York Times stated that Jolie knowingly violated an agreement that neither party could sell their shares without the other's consent. For years, Miraval was the home where their children played, the estate where they married in 2014, and the project Brad poured millions into transforming into an award-winning winery. Now it was the battlefield. According to Pitt's filings, Jolie's sale brought in a third party with poisonous intentions, turning what was once a family property into a corporate dispute. Jolie responded with her own filings, alleging that Brad blocked the sale for years, and that she had no obligation to seek his approval. It wasn't just a financial disagreement, it was a war of narratives, each side presenting a different version of the truth. Media outlets described the conflict as the Cold War phase. There were no public statements, no interviews, no paparazzi photos, just documents, accusations, counter-accusations, and the silent escalation of a private war now fought in international business courts. Sources close to Brad told People he felt deeply betrayed, while insiders aligned with Jolie claimed the sale was necessary for her emotional and financial freedom, speculation labeled. But beneath the legal language was a more painful reality. Miraval was the last shared symbol of the life Brad Pitt was trying to protect. Losing it wasn't just losing property, it was losing the final piece of what once held his family together. The filings became increasingly personal. Brad claimed Jolie sought to inflict harm by partnering with a company he believed would undercut Miraval's legacy. Jolie's team responded that Brad's narrative was revisionist. The press dissected every line, every phrase, every redaction. What began as a business dispute became a public autopsy of a marriage that still refused to die quietly. By early 2022, it was clear. The Miraval War wasn't about wine, it was about what wine represented. A home. A partnership. A family. All gone. Hollywood insiders described Brad during this period as focused but wounded, a man fighting a war he never imagined, not for custody, not for reputation, but for the last symbol of a life he once believed he could hold together with silence. This wasn't the loud collapse of 2016. This was the slow, cold dismantling of everything familiar, a different kind of breaking, the kind that doesn't explode, it erodes. The turning point didn't come with a statement, a headline, or a victory in court. It came when Brad Pitt quietly disappeared from the noise. After nearly 6 years of legal battles, custody disputes, and the Miraval War, Pitt stepped out of the public crossfire and into a chapter defined by something Hollywood hadn't seen from him in a decade: stillness. The first sign appeared in late 2022. Paparazzi photos showed Brad laughing, relaxed, standing on a balcony in Los Angeles beside Ines de Ramon, a jewelry executive 27 years younger. There were no red carpets, no Hollywood PR rollout, just two people photographed during late-night drives, post-concert walks, and quiet dinners. People magazine reported that Brad was in a good place, while insiders claimed he was relearning what it feels like to breathe after years of turmoil, speculation labeled. At the same time, Brad doubled down on sobriety. In the 2022 GQ profile, friends described him as disciplined and committed, attending meetings, embracing therapy, and structuring his days around recovery rather than work. This wasn't reinvention for the cameras, it was reconstruction. The man who had once used filmmaking to outrun emotional wounds was now facing them in real time. Professionally, Brad kept a low profile. He promoted Bullet Train and produced Blonde, but avoided any interviews that could reignite the Jolie narrative. Hollywood insiders told Deadline that Brad was choosing projects for peace, not prestige, preferring to stay behind the scenes rather than anchor massive franchises. For the first time since the 1990s, Brad Pitt wasn't chasing anything. He was healing. But the emotional weight of the past didn't vanish. The distance between Brad and some of his children remained stark. Public appearances with Jolie's side of the family, graduations, sorority ceremonies, birthdays, consistently showed only Angelina and the kids. When Zahara introduced herself at Spelman College in 2023 using the name Zahara Marley Jolie, tabloids erupted with speculation, labeled, "Is she distancing herself from Brad?" No statement confirmed it. No statement denied it. Just silence, the same silence that had defined Brad's pain since 2016. Even so, people who met Brad during this period described a man who looked lighter, not fixed, not whole, but unburdened. A friend quoted by People said, "He's stopped trying to win back the past. He's just trying to live." By 2024, the shift was undeniable. Brad Pitt wasn't the shattered father of 2016, nor the embattled film star of the Merivale War. He was something rarer in Hollywood, a man redefining himself quietly, without spectacle. He knew the wounds weren't gone. He knew some relationships might never be repaired. But he also knew, maybe for the first time, that peace wasn't something to earn, it was something to choose. And for a man who broke in silence, rebuilding in silence became the only